again, and thanks for joining us in this panel on digital identity. I thank you all for joining me here today. And while it's pretty much a morning here in Europe, I want us to especially thank Marco and Ali, who are joining this panel from Cayman Islands and Canada, respectively, basically in the middle of the night. So, guys, thank you. You rock.
No
Um,
problem. Anything for this incredible group of attendees.
And
Thank
of course,
you.
we got Hurricane Delta a few miles off the coast here.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. So we are like in the middle of something very, very strange happening around. Okay. So let us start with the brief introductions. And if I may ask Vivi to go first, and then Alex, Ali, and Marco to introduce yourself. So a word to you, Vivi.
Thank you so much. So it's a really great pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists, and also thank you for the organizers for inviting me. My name is Vivi Lahtenoja, and I work as a special advisor for the city of Helsinki in the area of data policy. And I've been active in the personal data scene for a few years now, and I had the pleasure of being in Barcelona personally last year also. So this is something that I am delighted to be returning to. Thank you.
Alex?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. I'm based in Barcelona also, so I've been doing a lot of things relating to digital identity, not just in Spain, but also in Europe. I'm the founder of Alasia, among many other things. And my focus, I would say, is on privacy, digital identity, and everything related to protect citizens' data.
Awesome. Ali, a word to you.
All right, so Ali Madavji here, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund and Scale Expenditures. And so we venture build and invest in early stage companies and have well over 100 portfolio companies between this fund as well as Loyal VC, where we're an LP. And recently also invested in one of Tim Draper's funds as well as a strategic LP.
Okay. And last we have Marco.
So, my name's Marco Annibali. I'm the managing director of BlockBlock Strategic, which is a consulting firm building custom blockchain solutions. Specifically, one of our projects is called the Kevlar project, and it is for bulletproof identity. It is not well known. It's not known at all. We're keeping it relatively quiet. And we're building the infrastructure that we believe is the correct infrastructure for global digital identity.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. And I believe I have to introduce myself as well very quickly. So my name is Vasilisa Marinchuk, and I'm a managing director of Barcelona Blockchain Week and essentially Democracy for All. I'm industry agnostic. I have worked in the multiple industries, including telecoms, petrochemicals, automotive, and I entered the blockchain space back in 2016, and I was absolutely fascinated by the capabilities of this technology, the people, the environment, and everything amazing things we can build with this. And today, I am delighted to lead this panel on digital identity with such amazing professionals. And let me start this discussion by quoting one of my favorite philosophers and political minds of the human history, Niccolo Machiavelli, who said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." So I think that really relates to our topic today. And probably it is worth starting with the plain question, what is identity? And why is that so important to talk and put it in the center of this discussion today and even connect the blockchain here? So I would probably ask Vivi to start the conversation. And guys, if you want to add something, just feel free, you don't need my flag to do it.
So thank you. I'm actually a philosopher by training. So this is a really interesting question for me. What is identity? When I was kind of preparing for this panel and reading around, what struck me was there is actually a philosophical school of thought that says there's no problem with identity. Identity is just something that's unique to you, and that's it. And I think that's the nice summation. Like, obviously there are questions of what happens to you as you grow older, as you change contexts, and to maybe introduce another quote into the mix, we have Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who said we all have three lives. We have the public one, the private one, the secret one. And I think that can be applied to identities as well. So I'm really interested in hearing from a panelist as well, like whether they believe that we ought to all have this one unique identity, which is something that's just unique to us, or whether it's appropriate or desirable to have multiples for our different lives.
Oh, I'll jump all over that one.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Marco.
My personal, and this is also derived from the research we've been doing to date, the only way to have privacy is to have a different identity for everything you do. Millions of identities, each of them specifically related to that one interaction in your life. And you control all of them. And we're working on ways of obfuscating it, sorry for that word, to make it so that you don't realize that you necessarily have that many identities. But the idea being is that you need to be able to say to one person, I am an employee of this company, and to another person, I am so-and-so's husband or wife, without having the two be the same person in terms of what the world can see about that, right? And because that's one of the biggest problems we have with privacy right now. It's not so much that, company A, company B, company C, company E promise to keep you private with their privacy policy. It's the fact that you have to trust that promise, and you shouldn't have to. You should have it so that company A, company B, company C, company D don't know that you're the same person that each of them has on their records.
So if we look at this from a practical perspective on sort of how the world works, right? You want to go to get a loan from a bank. I mean, they need to know all of your outstanding liabilities, to understand, whether or not they should be giving you a loan, and they need to understand your credit score to know if they should be giving you a loan. And then if you go to an employer, I mean, they want to know that you say don't have a criminal background, as an example. And so these are all different things that they check. And so I don't know if it's feasible to sort of have, and I think it's interesting, right? But I don't think it's feasible in a practical standpoint on the way things are going to have that full set of privacy in a way where, they wouldn't be able to sort of connect all of these dots and say, yes, this person is safe or is trusted or doesn't have a bunch of liabilities on areas that we can't see. And there is, say, no other creditors to their assets, et cetera, right? And so there's all of these different things that are sort of always part of that. And so
I'll send you an NDA, Ali, and then I'll tell you how we do it.
Fair enough. I mean, I think it's definitely quite fascinating, but I don't know if there's sort of any country right now that exists or any place that exists that sort of has this in practice, right? And this is the challenge, I think, from an adoption standpoint, getting all of these governments, all of these corporate entities, all of these, public entities like police force, et cetera, to all sort of change that process to align with, this method that you're talking about, right? So, having said that, I think identity does need to be sort of, in some ways, whether it's decentralized or centralized, still a way for parties to be able to identify and figure out those factors on an individual.
But then I think we have a problem. We're mixing sometimes the terminology, because it's not the same identity than an identifier. And most of the people, they're using the word identifier as identity. So probably if we come from a philosophical background, probably I would say identity is the way you relate to others. So basically you have a different identity for every interaction that you do. So it's not you, it's the kind of interactions that you hold. So probably you cannot put that in just one number or one just identifier. And of course, that's how we nobody talks about it, but that's how society works right now. So the way I said, you have three ways to get an identity. So first of all, of course, it's it gets imposed by a government. They come to you and say, no, this is your tax number, please pay pay with this tax number, and then you get an identity, whether you like it or not. Then probably you can buy this identity, meaning like we're using Google, Facebook, all of these platforms, we're using them as identities because it's the way we relate to other services or tools. So basically, we are paying for that with all of our data, and we have no privacy at all. That's bad. Or maybe we can try the hard way, and usually the hard way for me, it's always the better. But it's like, okay, let's build this wallet of different interactions with everyone while we try to keep them private. And that's probably the hard way, and I think it's the way to go. Probably you know about self-sovereign identity. And by the way, we are relying on zero-knowledge proof on different kind of technologies to try to keep as much as possible the privacy of the people while being able to solve these technical problems like credit score, or I can prove that I'm a client of a bank without even showing which bank it is. So these kind of solutions are available today. The main problem is that we need a standard. We need everyone to work with the same tools, and that probably will take long, I think.
I think you raise a really interesting point, Alex, in that the technology pretty much exists. It's there. We don't need to hone it that much. But then what Ali, you were mentioning was about adoption. Like, how do we actually make the people who need to adopt this, including, private people as well as organizations. And I was maybe wondering, because you referred to, Ali, to national governments and police and things like this, but we are talking about digital identities, right? And digital and data, personal data, and it doesn't know any boundaries. So why are national bodies relevant even in this kind of a digital identity discussion?
It's a very good question, right? So we actually spent a lot of time looking at this problem. So we work with the United Nations on, writing one of the flagship reports for the UN on emerging tech. And one of the key issues is around sort of the identity problem, especially when you look at, the developing world. And I don't really break out in reality. I think it's difficult to sort of break out digital identity and sort of what people might think of, like, say, physical identity, because in reality it all sort of moves in the same direction, and sort of the long run is that this all becomes very blended, right? And so you take that and then you look at, well, and there's sort of different forms of identity. I think it's sort of brought up with the identifiers, and maybe that sort of adds up into someone's identity, and there's all these different pieces. But you look at that, and then you look at the challenges around issuing that, right? There's very few countries, although Europe's probably leading the way on this, but there's very few countries that even have, say, purely digital sort of EIDs or et cetera, that are sort of live, right? It was talked about sort of in the earlier video for the opening presentation here. I mean, Estonia is obviously making some big strides on it, and has that live, right? But you're still seeing sort of major gaps on here. You're looking at countries and governments that are also not living up to expectations of issuing even identities in digital or physical form to their people, right? So obviously in Europe there's quite good coverage in this, but then you look at 1.7 billion people around the world without an identity, right? And that's more than 2 times the entire population of Europe.
But they do have an identity. Maybe it's not digital, but they do have an identity, because it's not something that it comes to a border or who controls that identity. So that's probably one of the things, like when we speak about self-sovereign identity, we are not trying to build a national identity at all. So we're trying to build something that I can use, and I can use it here. I can use it if I go to States, to Indonesia. So we should think about cross-border kind of things.
Yeah,
like, identity should have no business model, should not be a way of control or any kind of commercial tool to sell us more things.
So I think there's sort of the practical perspective and the ideological sort of standpoint, right? And if you look at it from a practical standpoint, I mean, when you travel right now, your passport's issued by your country, right? And then that's sort of what's recognized because of then a number of treaties and a number of things that country is doing to essentially help get that recognized, right?
But
And so,
that's just an identifier.
sure, but that's sort of the way that it works. And I get that there's
Mm-hmm.
sort of this ideological standpoint, which I could also be in favor of, but it just doesn't exist in sort of a practice where there's governments, or
Right.
individuals or corporates recognizing these identities that are, fully self-sovereign, as you sort of mentioned, right? And so we got to still look at that practicality. Like, if you are one of these people without identities that are issued by your government around the world, and there's a lot of them, I mean, that means you can't take loans and you can't open up bank accounts, and so you can't access all of these products. And you then are impacted from a business standpoint and maybe from an education standpoint for your family. And so there's so many different things that are impacting you because this infrastructure is not there.
And
So
there's
guys,
also all the crime that happens because this infrastructure is so broken. The current one is very badly broken. But again, we're using 16th century technology. The passport's been around for a long time. It hasn't really been improved in any real meaningful way. The speed of which you can go through a verification process of a passport, and a passport can be back checked to see if it's actually registered with the government, yes, that has sped up. Thank you to technology. Much slower than it should have, but that's the government legacy. Systems being onboarded takes time. I agree with Alex. Identity isn't your passport. A passport is a tool you can use to prove that a government recognizes who you say you are. And it's very important to remember that's who you say you are. When you're talking about identity and the term level that we're talking about it, identity is everything you've ever done, everyone you've ever known who knows you back. Every transaction you've ever done, every loan you've ever had, all of that, it's all your data. That's your identity. All of that is your identity. And when you walk into a bank, when you break down what a bank needs to know about you, it just needs to know that you're within their legal regulatory framework. In other words, do you live in that country, or are they allowed to serve people who don't live in that country but who don't come from bad countries? That kind of thing. They need to know that. They need to know, are you old enough to be held responsible for your actions? And they need to know, do you have any financial bad marks on your record? They don't need to know your name, your address, your phone number. They don't need to know any of that. They don't need it. They don't want it, to be honest with you. It actually adds a security burden to them to keep it safe. They have to take it now because that is how the world has grown up identifying people. It is by your name, your address, and your phone number. That gives you your identity in this world. Digital identity looks to change that and say, we need to create a trusted infrastructure where you have a name and an address and a phone number, but you having to disclose it isn't required. Just having it is all that's required. So when you walk into the bank and you say, I want to open an account, the bank system queries your identity system and says, yep, they meet the requirements because you allowed them to look once quickly. Do you meet their requirements? And your system answered yes, not this is his name, this is where he lives, and this is his phone number. Just yes, he has that information and it matches your requirements.
well,
And here's his financial history.
okay, yeah, thank you guys very much. So from this very thoughtful discussion, what we definitely can say is that there are kind of two types of the identities, right? So the one which is who we are and what we want to show to the world, and then that's a separate thing, like a government-proved, like digital identity, which eventually may come like to the world just to replace the real passport, like the paper, right? But it's still going to be there because this is how the governments operate. This is how the world operates. Well, in the nearest future, for sure. So my question is here more like, how do you think? Because what Marco was saying a lot is that, yeah, the bank can use this digital identity, like self-sovereign one, or he would prefer to use the government-proved one. Yes, you can have your wallet with all your identities and types of information. And yes, maybe it's quite cool for many applications around internet or whatever you use in this. But when it comes to actual interactions on business or law or anything, these institutions might still be interested in having their really approved identity. You know why? Because they have different records to check, like criminal records, I don't know, your credit story, actually, if your insurance story, because they check in all of that. Do they, you know what I mean? So that's my question. How do you think what is going to happen, even if we're going to have this personal identity which we manage ourselves and then we have a government proof, how the world will react, how the world would say, you know what, with which one I want to operate on which level?
But they are compatible in some way. So I can have my wallet with different credentials signed by anyone. And some of these credentials might be the passport. Even that can be really good. Because if I have my passport, I'm in full control of that. I can use it to onboard to many different tools and services outside of just like going through the airport control and showing my passport. I can use the passport for many other things. So they're not really, no, they are compatible, I think. We can use both in that sense.
You have to have some way to transition between them, right? You can't start tomorrow and go straight digital. It won't work. That's obvious. You're going to have, my best guess is 20 to 35 years of transition where people are moving from carrying both paper documents and a digital identity to just using their digital identity and letting their documents go. Much like the transition from cash to electronic. It's still ongoing. It's been ongoing since the 80s. When it became it became possible for everybody in the world to carry a piece of plastic about in the 80s, but it's still going on. There are places in this world you go where you can't get a piece of plastic yet.
Yeah, so I think
time.
sort of one of the challenges, and I agree that, you know, and very much in favor of looking at, you know, this world where digital identity, you know, can work effectively and you can sort of maintain and manage that privacy and control your own data. And I think that's very realistic as potentially a long run future for, say, a continent like Europe. But you look at, you know, even with this discussion, a lot of it's essentially based on leveraging the internet, and you've got 3.8 billion people without the internet, right? And so like we're literally just skipping half of the planet and saying like, well, the solution doesn't work, right? Like I don't think that's
Give
sort
it
of
time.
reasonable.
Give it time. I mean, the world's got to catch up to the internet. I mean, much like credit cards, go into middle of Africa and you stay away from a city. How easy is it to get a credit card? It's bloody hard.
Yeah,
But
no, but
that's
even
dangerous.
mobile is like an issue, right? Like, I mean, you take a place like, I don't know, Zimbabwe, right? The internet cost is 289 times the cost of 1 GB in India, right? That's still not an effective solution. And so even 20 years down the road, I'm pretty sure 30 or 50 years down the road, I'm sure we're still having some of these challenges, whether it's accessible and very expensive that a lot of individuals can afford it,
But
or right.
Ali, I'm really worried because like the only ones that seems to be worried about digitalizing India, for example, or Africa, it's Facebook and Google, because they want to bring their own identity to India and Africa. So they are the ones interested in like having everyone on internet, so they can force everyone to use their identity that's not private at all. So we need to do something before that happens.
I think
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, I think that's a wonderful point by you, Alex. Is that, and I do agree that, you know, give it time and we will have coverage in the world, and, you know, unless climate change gets us first, I guess.
Or that just reduces the number of subscribers we have to fulfill.
But absolutely, like we are going into a digital direction, and just like I do like the cash versus credit card analogy as well, in that it'll be a slow transition, and we will have both hand in hand. But I don't, and I think the kind of big tech companies that Alex mentioned can see this. They can see where this is headed, and they want to get there first. And that's why we do need ideology. We need adoption. We need pragmatism. We need realism. But we also need idealism about a paradigm shift where identities are not about what an organization can possibly get their hands on about you. It's about what you are okay to share with organizations in order to receive better services or whatever it is to be able to travel and so on. So this kind of like paradigm shift, I do call it, from a kind of like where organizations, the issuers of credentials or identities are at the center of our thinking, to this kind of self-sovereign, human-centric kind of way, where I, as the person, the holder of the identity, am like conceptually at the center, and ideology on an ideological level as well.
That's very interesting point you raised, Vivi, and actually to like all of you did, but this is essentially the problem. I mean, like I see it as well, like we can create this self-sovereign identity and then we will be deciding what information we're gonna share or not. But then you think about these huge corporations and companies who, in order to use their services, what they do, they're like, hey guy, you need to sign the terms and conditions that freaking long and do something about this. Oh, unless we're just not going to serve you, you're not going to get your iPhone, or you're not going to get the Facebook account or anything. And then finally, even if that you manage kind of all of that thing, you just sign in because you just want to really use this service. So how do we fight this? This paradigm must change a lot.
There's two problems you're presenting there. One is that we're thinking of digital identity as a global identifier. We're thinking in 16th century terms. Your identity is your name, your address, and your phone number and your birth date. All right? It isn't. As I said before, your identity is a whole slew of data that actually makes up everything that you are. And your identity viewed from different angles looks completely different. And we need to drop the concept of global identity. This one set of attributes that identifies you everywhere. We got to get rid of that, because that's exactly right. You'll go into a EULA agreement on a piece of software because you really, really, really just want to use it, and they'll say, disclose everything. And we'll go, yeah, whatever. And you go, and all of a sudden they've got everything on you. The infrastructure itself would allow that because it's self-sovereign, right? You're in control. Ideally, the world would have at least one or three watchdogger type people out there who'd be looking at, because all of this would be transparent. You can't allow corporations to ask for stuff in secret. The data that's exchanged would be in secret, but the stuff they ask for in order to let you use their service would not be secret. So companies that went in and just gobbled up all your data without giving you a choice, yes, a lot of people would get in and do it because they just don't care. But eventually somebody's going to pop up and say, these guys are asking for way more data than they need to do even their internal business. So they're probably trying to do some cross-matching.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of people, they don't understand that privacy is important.
Right, but then what happens is that's the story goes out and says, don't use Facebook, they steal everything, right? Just to give you access.
But nobody cares. They bought information from people for $20, I think.
Yeah,
sure.
I think Marco. I think
that's
Marco
the position. Like, I have
point.
nothing to hide, like,
Yeah, but if I go to the bathroom, I have nothing to hide, but I don't want to see me. Anybody
I agree with you
in the
completely.
bathroom, they're seated. It's intimacy. It's not privacy. It's like
agreed.
I think there's sort of different divergences, like globally, right? You see sort of in Europe, and sort of obviously the creation or the advent of GDPR obviously has been a really big step forward for a lot of privacy, but that also may not be the direction of the entire world, right? And it has already started to shape actually a lot of the way that a lot of corporates are looking at things and the way that they're structuring things. But you're going to have differences in regulation, most likely in other parts of the world, and it's not all going to follow the same sort of way of potentially protecting individuals, maybe as well in, say, North America or Asia, or smaller countries, as you sort of break that out. And so I think that's sort of an interesting piece to look at. But is there going to be regulators, as sort of sort of been the case in Europe, where they can actually enforce some of these rules that are going to help shape globally and move it more in the direction of maybe what Marco and even Alex is sort of alluding to?
Well, the beautiful thing about this type of platform, when we're talking purely fully decentralized, not built on blockchain, because blockchain alone won't do it. But fully decentralized, self-sovereign identity, then the only person the GDP applies to is you. because you're the one who has all the data, and all the people that you're using your identity to connect with don't have your data. And fundamentally, they don't want it. All they want is the right to look if they need to while you are their customer. And customer could be, you know, for a bank, a government, an employer, whatever, right? All of your relationships are in fact a vendor-customer relationship.
No, absolutely. Like fully agree. I think that starts to change though, and where like these solutions become more valuable is sort of as the regulators create and take away some of the power from enterprise and sort of move it back towards people, right? And that's where that power dynamic enables, you know, solutions, I think, of what you're sort of talking about to be more likely to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to pick up on your point about regulation not necessarily following the GDPR when it comes to privacy around the world. I'm actually quite hopeful. Like, I am from the EU myself, obviously, but I do see California, I do see other countries in the world following, and I do see a kind of power vacuum emerging with the crisis that the United States is in right now, which the EU would do well to capitalize on.
What crisis?
In the sense of kind of moral thought leadership in the world, and I do see that they have succeeded in kind of bringing privacy to the fore as regulators. And you know, they talk about the EU as a regulatory superpower, and because big tech corporations have already had to become compliant with the GDPR to, you know, more or less extent, they are pushing for very similar federal level privacy legislation in the United States, because they've already done it, right? So what they would like actually in the United States is very similar to the GDPR, because they've already done the work of becoming compliant.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
costs them a bloody fortune, and they don't want to spend the same money again for different regulations.
Exactly. So that's why definitely, like, no patchwork of state by state legislation, and very similar, not an inch more, but very similar to the GDPR. They've done the work, and then all the kind of like smaller national companies would be in trouble because they haven't had to do this very expensive thing that the big tech giants have. So that's an interesting kind of, I think, occurrence that's going on in American politics at the moment.
Then we need the standards. We need technological standards like the verifiable credential from W3C. They are probably right now the standards, but we need legal standards. If we want to have some kind of global identity, probably we need some kind of global legislation, and that probably even would take more than 25 years, as you said. It will take longer than that, because all of the states, they want to have their own.
Right. The problem is that if you think about self-sovereign identity, you don't need regulation for self-sovereign identity. You need regulation for the people who consume self-sovereign identity.
Exactly.
Because you are a law of one at that point, right? You are, if you've got a problem with your identity, it's all on you. No one else could have done anything to it. If you give, it's like walking around with a pocket full of cash, right? If you decide to throw it up in the air, that's on you.
So somebody, I read the paper the other day, then the author did not know anything about self-sovereign identity, and he was like talking about personal states. And the full idea of personal states probably was like had a lot of similarities with self-sovereign identity in the sense that he was saying that in the future everybody will have his own state and will be like his own boss in that sense. So it was, I like this idea of personal state.
That's it. That's self-sovereignty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand,
and then you set up treaties with everybody else.
No, but this is a direction that the conversation quite often takes when we talk about identity, and that's the very, very hyper individualistic approach. But when we think about personal data, that's part of, you know, your digital identity. All of that exists as a result of an interaction or a relationship between you and something or someone else. All this data that's floating about, right, about you and that you are involved in generating, you have rights over it, but so do other actors, other people, other entities. And just kind of thinking about the collective nature of of data and how important that is for things like analytics and different kinds of machine learning algorithms as well. What, like, it is unfeasible to think of data as an individual's property, so to speak. Property in the first place is, I think, a wrong analogy there, but also as relating to just one individual.
I'm going to argue with that one.
Please.
The data is literally, think of yourself as a software object, and this is your attributes. And you have millions of them because you have lots of relationships. But the attributes are yours. The fact that they were generated because of a relationship you had with someone or something else at some point in time doesn't change the fact that it's yours. It just means that that particular attribute is possibly shared, or that particular relationship was responsible for generating two attributes, one on you and one on them. But once the attribute exists, it is not anybody's but yourself. You're right, though, you cannot generate an identity in a vacuum. That is, in fact, the true definition of anonymity, right? You're anonymous when nobody knows who you are, which means you've never touched anyone or talked to anyone, you've never bought anything.
Yeah, but let me maybe come back on this this kind of ownership paradigm of data. Do I understand you correctly that when you say the data is yours, you refer to I should be able to exercise property rights on this data?
Not really. I'm in control of data more than possession, because like probably my data is a picture of me with something in the background. That something in the background is not mine. I think like ownership.
But the picture is.
Yeah, the picture maybe, but I have no ownership over it. So probably the discussion it's philosophical at that point. So about what's ownership. And the other thing is, like,
at that point we don't own anything really, because we're all going to die, and then it belongs to whoever finds it.
Exactly. But the only I would say that all of these attributes you've been talking about, they should be private, and I should have control on who can see them, because like they give a lot of power to the people having these attributes about me. If the better they know me, the better they can convince me to buy things or to vote for someone. Or that's so. It's quite important to have privacy in order to avoid this kind of abuse of power, because all of this information is power today. And one of the things, like you're talking about that data moving from one part to the other, and I do believe in the future we can use homomorphic encryption. So basically, instead of data traveling through internet, the only thing that can travel through internet will be some kind of software, pieces of code. So the bank wants to know if I can get a loan, so he will send me this piece of code. It's signed, by the way. I can give this piece of code access to all of my data, all of it, because no data will leave my pod. The only thing that will leave, it will be a yes or no. So maybe the decision on giving me a loan probably will be on how I play Fortnite. If I'm like, I don't play Fortnite, but those kind of information, they can just take a look at everything, and with that decide if I'm eligible for a loan or not. But no data should leave my own identity, because that's a lot of power I'm giving to others. Even if they say, no, we will delete the information. And as you say, like most of the companies, they don't want to have that. It's a big responsibility, and they are liable for that. So they don't want to have that information. But then some will want to. So by sharing this kind of...
most of them want to have...
Yeah.
Most of them want to have a global identifier for their customers that they can use to cross-match with Facebook and Google and everybody else who's got big data sets. And the part of this whole self-sovereign identity concept is getting rid of the global identifier so that you can actually freely exchange information with, say, that bank, because the bank won't have a global identifier for you that they can go use to cross-reference you with other people. They will just have access to trusted, certified sources of data about you, and only the resulting data that is about you gets transmitted to them, Your name and your phone number and your address don't get transmitted because it's not relevant to the process. What's relevant to the process is this person accountable and responsible? Right?
Guys,
And this is
I
part
want
of the
to
biggest
like
problem
a
we've been
little
trying to
bit.
solve. How do you get accountability and responsibility in the same package with privacy?
Yeah, I mean, like, guys, I've been looking in the questions, and like I think it's right that we have to go back a little bit to just because people are asking. So actually, like how blockchain relates to their digital identity, right? Because if that identity is stolen or something happens to it, it's supplanted. So the people are interested in this. So can you elaborate while we still have a little bit of time on this? And whoever wants to take a flag.
Technical level?
Don't go too technical. I'm sure people will like to, understand what you're saying.
Look, okay, so let's the high level. Blockchain gives you a trustless, immutable database, ideally, if the protocol is designed correctly, blah, 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 blah. Which is a great basis to store data that you want to keep highly secure, but also don't want anyone to tamper with. And part of that tamper-proofness is the fact that it's public, right? That the world can go look at the ledger and say, wait a minute, those two numbers don't add up. Somebody's tampered with this data, right? That's part of it, how you secure a blockchain, is that the chain is available for everyone. In identity, blockchains are ideal for large-scale relationship management, right? So when two entities wish to have a relationship with each other, and one entity has 10,000 employees and the other entity is a country, say 300 million people, and they want to have a relationship with each other, there's a lot of data going on there. And that's where a blockchain makes a lot of sense in terms of an immutable record that says that these two parties have these relationships all intermingling with each other. The core is the problem that we're facing here, because while everyone says that blockchain is, in fact, DLT stands for decentralized ledger technology, it is decentralized, but it is not fully decentralized. In a blockchain, there are either nodes, validators, or miners, depending on your protocol. Those people control it. Right? There's no way to look at it any other way. They control it. Yes, one can argue the users have some control because they can just walk away and stop using that chain. But arguably, once you've got value invested in a chain, you're not walking away unless something really weird happens. So validators, for example, Ethereum, I think, is somewhere around 25,000 or 30,000 nodes currently operating globally. Those 20 to 30,000 people who own those machines that are running Ethereum, mostly on Amazon, are the owners of Ethereum. Not the currency, but the platform. And when it comes to self-sovereign identity, the only problem we really haven't solved yet, and we need to solve, and it's what we're trying to figure out right now, is how do you build an infrastructure where nobody can own it? And that's the tricky part. We need a decentralized, like a blockchain, but not a blockchain, at least none that we've seen yet in the open market, that can allow people to individually both contribute their computing resources to manage or can sustain the network, and also have access to the network, so that their identity, the core of their identity, not all the relationships, just the core of it, is in their full control, and they can feel safe that there's no way anyone else could overtake it. Not a government, not a large corporation. Nobody could actually subvert that. It's a hard problem. We're working on it.
So basically what we do is like we focus on the idea of identity container. Identity container is just a software in the cloud that's connected peer-to-peer to anyone. So it's more like a mesh of networks of peer-to-peer connection, I would say. Not that much yet. I use the blockchain. I like it. And the more I know with blockchain, the less I use it, by the way. But it's just like some kind of DPKI. At the end of the day, I use it for known certificates where they can publish their public keys, and I can be sure that this is the public key that I need it for the signature. Nothing else, by the way. And the other thing is, like, we are completely blockchain agnostic. I don't care which blockchain you use. Even like if you use 2 or 3, then probably it's more decentralized.
But it runs in the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. It runs in the cloud, but
So it's centralized.
No, you can run it at home on a box if you want it. It could
you
run
run it
on your mobile
smartphone?
phone. Exactly.
Yeah.
It can run everywhere. So the idea of identity container is that I can put it in a Raspberry Pi at my home and it works. I can put it on the cloud and it works. The main thing is like probably will happen the same like when you say the cash and credit card. Basically, when it was cash, most of the people they had the cash at home. Yeah, decades. No, but with cash, most of the people, they have the cash at home. But then when we digitalized everything, we went with credit cards and we grow globally. Then we needed banks more than ever. Probably we need this notion or this idea of data banks. And probably I'm answering one of the questions, like, I think digital identity has no, probably bank is not the word. Okay, but.
Thank you.
All of this information, I need a way to recover it. So probably we need, we're working on the idea of social recovery. So there are many ways. If like I can connect my box in my home to the box in my mom's home. So if I lose mine, I can rely on hers. Like there are many ways of doing that. And I do believe digital identity should have no business model, but there are a lot of services you can build on top of that they can help you control better your digital identity. It's like the promise with Bitcoin, you can be your own bank. I learned the hard way that I don't want to be my own bank. I'm not good at that. So with identity, probably will be the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not funny at that time when my phone went to sleep.
Right. I think we, Vasilisa, do we have another question?
Yeah, I mean, we are fine, guys. So basically, I would like to ask you just for some last remarks before we wrap up the session. I mean, I already I think it was super interesting and like, I'm sure people learned a lot. I did certainly. So just a few last words from each of you and anything you want to really, highlight. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll touch on
ladies first, please.
Sure.
Vivi.
Oh, I started last time. I can go last this time.
Okay, then Marco, let's start with you then.
Okay, but I went last. Well, I mean, we've got this conversation could go on for hours because this is a great panel.
Absolutely.
We've got lots of different perspectives represented here. This is fantastic. Generally, I would love to connect up with you guys offline, outside the conference possibly, just to plumb the depths of what you're thinking about, especially your DPKI concepts, because that might help me solve the problem I'm trying to solve, which is how to build that core PKI infrastructure. And other than that, if anyone's got questions or answers, I'm in the Telegram channel. I'm also a member of the DevDAO, which you can find quite a bit about online, which is a DAO specifically designed to build decentralization tools. And of course, BlockBlocks, you can just Google it or find me on LinkedIn. If you're going to send a request to my LinkedIn, send a message with it that says why you want me to connect with you. I get a lot of connection requests and I just delete them.
Absolutely. I love this last point. Like, please, if you ever connect somebody you don't know yet on LinkedIn, say something.
Say why you're trying to connect.
Exactly.
Why should I connect with you? I mean.
Okay, now, moving to the next, like, I don't know, Alex, do you want to take a word? Yeah. Okay.
Sure. What I would say that somebody said at the beginning that digital identity is broken or identity is broken. Well, I do believe that internet is broken. So we design internet without digital identity, and then we build thousands of identities on top of the internet. Probably we should think around and do the opposite. Build first some kind of decentralized identity, and then create a new internet on top of that.
Why? Facebook did it for us.
You're right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think this has been a really interesting discussion. I mean, from my standpoint, I do believe that, and we look at things very closely from, adoption in a sort of short, medium, and long run, obviously, because, we do invest in companies. We do have companies in the identity space. as well. I think a big part for us is looking at sort of the convergence of technologies, and as they sort of come together, that unlocks sort of new opportunities. And so, you know, pairing, for example, facial recognition with the ability as like identifiers and ID, right? Like, does that sort of create new opportunities, or leveraging AI in some ways for this? Blockchain is obviously one of those layers. And so, you know, this starts to unlock more and more opportunities. And then a big part is obviously the human side of helping to push adoption and growing that out globally, right? And so I think that's always important to look at as part of this. And then also the nuances globally, just because there's so many different factors depending on regions that you're looking at, you know, internet penetration, you know, affluence levels, all sorts of other things that are coming into play as part of this discussion.
Thank you, Ali. And Vivi, yeah, you're gonna have like a last word.
Thank you. Yeah. No, yeah, thanks everyone for a really, really fun, lively conversation. And maybe if I want to leave something for everyone here, it would be that we need to also be ideologues in the sense that we need to have an idea of where we want to go, what is the world that we want to live in, and not just go wherever the technology happens to take us. So be aware of the not just the how, but the actual what.
Thank you very much, and actually,
Especially as a buyer.
I really agree with you here. So basically, the technology itself is agnostic. I mean, it can be done for good or for bad. Finally, we are all humans. We are responsible for what's going to happen with us, with the technology, how we're going to use that. So guys, thank you so much for this session. It was absolutely a blast. I'm sure we learned a lot, and like we have lots of people watching us. I invite everyone, because you already were mentioning that maybe you want to continue the conversation. First of all, yes, you can join the chat like as attendees and chat there. Plus, we have a Telegram channel that I'm gonna put the link after this session when I'm like a bit off. I will put in the link in the chat, but it's essentially, if you will search for Democracy for All or BC and Blockchain Week, you will find the chat, and that's in Telegram, and you can connect with everybody there, and let's have such discussions there. That's absolutely awesome. So thank you very much. I think the new panel is up to start. Well, it's just 2 minutes late. We're improving. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.